Hello, this is going to be a video tutorial for the content page in Unit 1, Activity 3. In this activity, we will focus on narrative writing. And so in the Minds On section, you'll be introduced to the word narrative, and they'll use a movie clip from the movie How the Grinch Stole Christmas to give you an idea of how narration works. And so you'll have a narrative that, a narrator that will describe what is happening. So the characters in the story are kind of in the background in terms of the vocals, and you can hear a narrator describing the action. That's kind of what we're going to do. You're going to end up telling your own story in your own words, and so you're going to have to become your own narrator in this activity. If we move on from just the word narrative, we're going to focus specifically on a narrative essay. So that's the style of narrative writing that we're going to do. And it's different. When we see the word essay, sometimes students think of research essays or persuasive essays where they have to make arguments. You're not writing a standard 5-paragraph sort of practical essay. A narrative essay does something different. It does two things in particular. It tells a personal story. So when you write a narrative essay, you're writing a personal story, and it includes a theme, so a message or a meaning behind the story. So if you have those two elements, a story and a theme, you have a narrative. Okay. And if we want to kind of break down the narrative elements further here, you can see that there are 10 narrative elements. There are 10 things that need to be included to have a proper narrative essay. One of them is a specific point of view, usually the author's own point of view. So you would be writing a narrative essay in first person. As I mentioned, you have to have a theme, which is a message, a lesson, or a value. That usually is introduced in the opening paragraph and is usually summarized in the concluding paragraph of your narrative essay. You should have an overall tone, so some sort of an emotion or a feeling that comes through, and it should match your theme and the story you're telling. Do you have a serious tone, an angry tone, a joyful tone? A narrative essay can convey a lot of different feelings. You usually don't want to try to convey more than one feeling in one narrative essay, though. You want to focus on one particular tone. Since you're telling a story, you're usually going to do that in chronological order. So you'd have a beginning, a middle, and an end to your narrative essay. And stories need characters, so you're going to have characters in your story. Usually the author is the main character because the author is telling his or her own story. You will need dialogue, not a lot. Usually you can get away with just a few lines of dialogue in a narrative essay, but you want to show the characters talking to each other. You need to establish settings, so what are the locations in your story? You need to have a conflict or a problem. You've probably heard this line before, but if you don't have a conflict, you don't have a story. Okay, so there has to be some element of characters competing with each other or fighting or arguing, or it doesn't necessarily have to be two characters in conflict. You could have a character in conflict with him or herself in dealing with a personal problem. Lots of different ways to go with conflict. And then you should use precise details, and you should use descriptive language when you're writing a narrative essay. With that said, what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to take these 10 narrative elements and we're going to try to apply them to 4 narrative essays here. And so you can see here that the narrative elements have been turned into questions here. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to either read or listen, and when you click on these links, you'll be given the option to either read or listen each of these narrative essays. And while you're doing so, answer these 10 questions for each of these 4 essays. Hopefully what that does is that gets you to better understand the narrative elements, and hopefully it gets you into kind of critiquing what makes a good narrative essay and maybe what makes one that's not so good. So what do these narrative essays do effectively and ineffectively? Ultimately, you'll be writing your own narrative essay in this activity. So what you're doing here is hopefully learning and kind of practicing, kind of seeing how the narrative elements work so that you can better write your own narrative. When you do click on each of these four, it'll open in a new page, and you'll see that you can either listen to or read each of the narrative essays. These narrative essays are very short. I think all of them are about 500 words, so they all fit on one web page here. All right, with that said, we move down to the consolidation, and like I said, ultimately in this activity you're writing your own narrative essay, and so we're going to start thinking about what the topic can be for our narrative essays. And so it says, in order to write your own narrative essay, you will need to choose a personal story, of course from your own life, and match it with a theme. Okay, so there's lots of different ways that you can go with this, and so I'm just going to give you some ideas on how to think up a topic. And so number one, I would say narrow your focus. You are writing an essay, not a novel. You will not be able to tell your entire life story. The more you can narrow down the story that you're telling, the better. So try to focus on one specific event or one specific day in your life. Okay. Number two, this is a narrative essay, not a research essay. So we do not need to research the topic of our essay. You're not writing for information or for opinion here. You're writing to tell your own story. So you're going to use your own words and you're going to use your own experiences in this narrative essay. Here are some questions that might get you thinking. So that might help you come up with a specific event that you want to talk about. So what did I learn from my biggest mistake? What did I learn from the biggest challenge in my life? What is my proudest moment? Why does it make me proud? If you answer one of these questions, it might lead you to a specific story and a specific theme that you can use for your own narrative essay. If you want, you can click on this, I believe. This is the same website that these 4 stories came from, and there are hundreds of narrative essays on that website. You can find them on a wide variety of topics. So on the theme page, it just lists all of the different topics of the different essays. And so that might kind of get you thinking about what you can write in your own narrative essay. All right, just a final thought here. There is no right or wrong way to choose your narrative essay topic. I would definitely brainstorm and kind of come up with a bunch of different events in your life that you think might work for a good narrative essay. Ultimately, you have to focus on one theme, so one message that you want to convey, and one personal story. Okay. Now you'll be done with the content here, and you can move on to the assignment, where sure enough you're going to write your own narrative essay.